when I see it on mine. It says it's live for me now.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna do a tweet while you're reading.
Okay, I mean, do you just want me to read the intro? Like, that's...
Yeah. And then I'm just doing the tweet.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, welcome to the Bangladesh special. Not the happiest of situations, but I guess here goes. Students started demonstrating at the University of Dhaka, and they decided to voice their concerns over a recently reinstated quota that gives a total of over 50% government jobs to pre-selected people based on arbitrary categories like being the grandchild of somebody who fought Pakistan for Bangladeshi independence in 1971. Those specific jobs amount to around 30% of the quotas, with the other 25% being earmarked for other groups. The ultimate gripe is that the system is grossly unfair, and if you can imagine what an entire generation of people who've had their lives handed to them by the state would be like, I'm sure you can be sympathetic with the students. These quotas were overhauled and made essentially redundant in 2018 after after students challenged them legally until the Supreme Court reinstated them in June, leading to the current protests. The protests have killed over 110 people, with thousands injured, since beginning on Monday. The Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, notorious queen of the fast fashion industry, has blamed the quote-unquote right-wing Jamaat-e-Islami party for fueling chaos and cancelled future diplomatic trips. The internet has been shut off, and the Bangladeshi government has declared a curfew, deploying the military with shoot-on-sight orders being given. A small update on that is the...
I just posted. I went to post a YouTube link, and I posted the background video as the link instead. I'm so stupid.
Nice.
Sorry.
Was it the junior officers that posted the statement?
The one I just tagged you in
earlier. Yeah, but not officially. It's not an official statement.
It's not an official one. Okay.
No.
Okay, but there was a statement from a group within the military, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Apparently,
okay. Yeah. That basically said that they would refuse further unlawful orders, I believe is the wording, and ask not to be given any further unlawful orders, I believe.
And those unlawful orders would probably be, telling
the
military to
orders?
shoot on sight.
Yeah.
Honestly,
party,
that order is a real, from a country like Bangladesh, that's a kind of a surprising thing to try to command.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. The opposition party, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, or BNP, leader, Rahul... I'm not going to be able to say that name. Rahul Ahmed. I'm just going to say that. Was also arrested. There was curiously also a prison break conducted by the students, as far as we're aware. Seems a bit sussy. The state broadcaster's building was also set ablaze in an apparent arson attack by the students. And I guess 300 cops were also injured. And that's all I've got.
So, I think I want to say like, people have been saying it started on Monday, like this Monday this week, but I want to say last week I was live and I literally said something like, oh, there's some interesting developments in Bangladesh, something about like a quota system, and I said I think it's about how a lot of the factories there, you kind of have to show up to get a job or something. That's what I'm thinking it was. Like, they like make it so there's no like permanent stuff. And I was like, I swear to God, that happened last week.
You definitely said something. I can't remember exactly what, because it was so brief. I think you may have shown a video, or we may have shown... It might have been a VOA video for all we know.
No, because I don't think there was. I'm not sure if there was videos, but I'm pretty sure I said something last week. So, I don't know. It might have started before Monday, but I think Monday is when it really like exploded, and then it's exploded again, similar to how the Kenya riots exploded because
Yeah.
of police repression and shooting protesters.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess like let's get into a little bit about what the quota system actually is. Uday, if you want to fill us in.
Yeah, I mean, so in South Asia, you get just as a part of society, you get quotas for marginalized people and communities and ethnicities across the board, and Bangladesh isn't any different. This quota specifically is for, as Jack mentioned, the kin of the freedom fighters in 1971. Now, this group is definitely a group with a lot of state privileges, even if the quota wasn't there in as Jack mentioned, in 2018, if I remember correctly. But they have been favored. These families have, they are in the political or business elite, and I mean, the government is basically, Sheikh Hasina's government is basically still living on the sentiment of Bangladesh's founding father, Mujibur Rahman, or Bangabandhu, who was her father, and she's basically living off his accolades, and that's what gives her legitimacy. That's what she has used to um,
No, she wasn't. But this she wasn't always in power. If I recall, she was prime minister, voted out, and then became prime minister again.
yeah,
Or am I incorrect?
yeah. So she now has been in power since 2008. Uh, so Bangladesh, after independence, there was a bit of a military regime. That's when Bangabandhu, her father, was assassinated. The rest of her family was assassinated. Her and a few sisters were overseas, and then these military guys took power. And then since the late 80s, early 90s, it's basically been two parties in power: the Awami League, led by Sheikh Hasina, and then the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. And basically, power's gone back and forth between them. And since 2008, Hasina has been in power. And over the last 10 years, she's basically decimated the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. Its actual leader, Khalida Zia, is in house arrest in Bangladesh. She's not allowed to, do any political events or something, because then she won't be allowed access to healthcare and stuff like that because she's old and dying also. So it's a very, I don't know, strongman kind of rule that Hasina has, and she's just been consolidating herself, and
Yeah, and I imagine this quota law actually helps with that consolidation quite a great deal.
yeah, definitely. So if we look at the BNP versus the Awami League, the BNP is the one who are accused of being more pro Pakistan over Bangladesh after Bangladesh's independence, especially. Um, so that's why Hasina, she has a lot of like, what's the word? She tries to portray them as terrorists, I guess, and that's why there's that link to Jamaat Islami and all of that. They're radical Muslims and all of
Mm-hmm.
that, and they're anti, the independence fighters who fought for the creation of Bangladesh, which was her father. So that's how she directs the narrative, and it's
Yeah, the whole
only
counter-revolutionary narrative.
yeah,
Because they even just so like they refer to the government as like the revolution still,
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like how
yeah,
you would see in us like Soviet era. And I was saying like the system, the quota system, it's almost like feudalism, but
Or
with like
Iran.
government positions
yeah.
instead of land. Did you say or Iran?
Hmm.
Yeah, they do call them Revolutionary Guard Corps. Yeah, they guard the revolution. They're the vanguard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was curious. Okay, go ahead.
No,
You're saying
just quota system is around government jobs. This isn't something necessarily alien to South Asia, is what I'm trying to say. But
yes.
people in Bangladesh have been, despite Bangladesh's economy per capita being higher than India because of, I think Jack said, what did you say about Hasina
The
being
queen of fast fashion.
fashion? Yeah, yeah. Despite that, wages and unemployment in Bangladesh, especially for youth, has been a major problem over the years, and it still is a
Do
major
they
problem.
do they also suppress their wages like China does?
Uh, yeah, I would say if you're looking at it from the capitalist perspective, the unions definitely are beaten down upon, and it's the corporations that have more power in that sense.
Hmm.
So through protesting, there's always protests like nearly every week of a garment factory worker, uh, like a company, the workers of a garment factory are protesting, asking for wages or asking for their Ramadan bonuses, or so that happens all the
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah, like I
protests.
said before, I said, oh, one of these protests looks interesting, so it might have even been a completely different protest I was referring to before.
Yeah, it could have spiraled from that too. Like Bangladesh is just like that.
Because I wasn't even sure. I just saw something probably on Twitter or something
Yeah,
and took note of it. And so the actual like I've heard. So I want to get into some narratives that have gone around, and the first one is like they use a specific word to refer to these students, but they basically called them Pakistani,
yeah,
and like it's a specific word to refer to the collaborators who worked with the Pakistani. And so the students went out and said, if you want to call us that, then we're that, and they incorporated that into a chant that was a greater chant. And it seems like that part of the chant where they say they're this specific word that means counter-revolutionary is taken out and has been circulated by the pro-government people to start doing misinformation against the students as well.
yeah. The Razakars, I think.
That's
Is
that's what I believe it is. That's what I think so.
Yeah. Sorry, could
So,
you repeat the last part of your question?
oh, it just seems it's from what I've seen, it's they've cut that specific part out of the
Yeah.
protest chant and they've circulated around to start a conspiracy against the students saying that they are these actual radicals. They're admitting to it.
Yeah, and that's where the Jamaat Islami kind of link comes in, because she's trying to frame this as a hardline Islamist movement. The pro Pakistan League, in the 80s, 90s, when you had BNP in government, they were closer to Pakistan, and um, there were arguments that they were more of an Islamist political regime. But Hasina in the past 10 years, she's gotten bet with Islamists when it comes to pushing ahead her agenda if, it works for them. So at the end of the day, it's, whatever gets her to stay in power. And this pro Pakistan thing is pretty strong because just, the sentiments around independence. And you can see that by the fact that, she's still living off the laurels of her father. Um, I doubt that if he was here today, he'd want her as his daughter, but that's another thing.
Whoa. So the other thing that I've seen that seems to have a little bit more weight to it is that these have moved on to be anti not they've moved on from anti-quota protest and have actually become more revolutionary where they're calling for complete regime change now.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, that has been happening. It's widened, snowballed into like a bigger anti-government movement. That's kind of happened in mass protests over the last few years. In 2018 or 2019, there were these massive protests after it was over road safety, and a bus ran over some students um, just outside of Dhaka. And after that, students came out on the street and started protesting for months. And like what we're seeing today is basically what happened then. Like the police come out, RAB comes out, and they start, using a lot of force. When we're talking about, the crackdown by the state, it's not only the security forces. Uh, the Awami League, which is Sheikh Hasina's party, they have a very strong like youth wing and
Hmm.
different wings with strong mobilization capabilities. So whenever there is a kind of anti-government tinge to protests, they basically set these guys out and to go beat up whoever they want, and they basically act as non-state actors
Hmm.
to suppress
normally
protests.
normally using like long clubs or sticks to beat
Yeah,
people.
yeah, exactly, and beating up students, and they'll get away with it because they're on the side of the narrative.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
And yeah, so that's it's a kind of been described as almost like it's like football gangs type activity, where
Yeah,
you can get very violent with that. But that was initially, where they were like taking ground and holding territory from each other.
yeah,
Now, there's obviously like Myanmar's close by and all that stuff.
yeah.
Is there any way that this could escalate into some sort of armed conflict? And is this unusual for protests so far in Bangladesh, or have they largely been like this in the past?
I would say they have largely been like this. Like you'll see a lot of voices saying that there's a revolution in Bangladesh, and I'd be the first to hope that. But seeing how the state has just cracked down, like the strategy is just to beat them down into submission till they don't come out anymore. And we have seen in the past, like we have seen the scale of this because of the attention and 100 dead in about a week or less than a week now. The scale of this is notable, but at the end of the day, there really is no consolidated opposition. And going back to the letter by junior officers, at the end of the day, the military is still very much under Hasina's control. Like the generals and the higher officials, they are the ones who are helping her, maintain her supremacy or all of that. So they're all in hand together, and you know these junior officers won't be able to do much on their own anyway. Um, so yeah, I mean, the way I think it'll go, it's just gonna kind of fizzle out with more arrests and more crackdowns because that's been the pattern of things over the last few years, and the state is really in a really strong position. It has been, and it's had a lot of practice beating up its citizens. So yeah, I don't see this, causing tremendous change. There might be some legal things, or the government may like introduce a quota to appease some of them, or say we're gonna not make it 50% or 30%, we're gonna make it less or something. But at the end of the day, it's not gonna change Hasina's grip on power that much. It might make it a bit shaky momentarily, but in the big picture of things, like she's very well entrenched there, and the people and like the politicians and military that she has brought up to this point, they are pretty much with her, and there's no kind of opposition from that.
And I have also seen things like, we mentioned the prison clash and stuff, but there's also like other like property damage. Are
Yeah.
those like random crimes, or are they specifically targeted because they might be like regime loyal?
Some are targeted, but Bangladesh, like it's the environment is such that when there are protests and the cops come, violence does flare up in the area really fast. And whether it's people burning things or throwing rocks, or then the cops shooting back and tear gas, like infrastructure damage just does happen a lot. One thing that was really big was that the students, they specifically burned down like a metro station. uh, so that was like a targeted thing, but there's also a lot of people getting caught up in random acts of violence or infrastructure being damaged in that, just because it spills over because of the scale of the violence.
And then obviously there's been a lot of reporting on how there's like communications blackouts.
Yeah.
Technically, violation of I want to say natural human rights according to the UN at this point.
That's not really a human right in South Asia,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, obviously that's not out of the ordinary, but I think a lot of people who are overseas and stuff have been trouble
Yeah.
communicating with their families and things like that.
Yeah. I think like the scale of this and like the kind of coverage that's of it in Western media right now, or international media, is quite high, and that's opening a lot of eyes towards
Hmm.
Bangladesh. Uh, but I mean, what's happening isn't really anything that much different from what has been happening over the last decade. So it's just that more eyes on it, I guess now.
Yeah, I mean, we could have even been even more ahead. It seemed like right, like especially the last day because it's exploded. There's been a lot of coverage of it.
Yeah.
So as far as that goes, like if more attention is being brought on Bangladesh, um, you know, just say like a crazy long shot thing like sanctions, like how much international pressure would people actually need to bring for something as serious that to happen?
So that's a good question because before in the past there were sanctions against like some Bangladeshi military personnel and personnel within the Rapid Action Battalion, which has been accused of human rights violations during curbing protests and movements in the last decade, and a lot of this was brought on by the U.S. But I think in today's geopolitical climate, it's a lot different because Bangladesh is highest per capita GDP in South Asia, and like China's become a big player there also. So
Hmm.
like West is, they're not, if they go in and start, talking about human rights and all that stuff, and you need to do this, like Bangladesh doesn't have to listen. Um, and I don't think it's in the West's best interests, or I mean, it's
Or any interest.
yeah, 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 So I don't think there'll be much pressure. There'll be some international condemnation, but at the end of the day, people are still going to get their cheap clothes from Bangladesh.
Yeah, because like with student coverage, or not student coverage, but Western coverage of people who are actually protesting in the West, rapid in division name equals human rights violations for some reason. That's exactly what I was thinking, where I was like, oh yeah, of course, the
Yeah,
rapid response teams, huh? But
yeah,
people in the West who are like doing solidarity protests, which I also heard India has been doing as well. Um, Basically, that's what they've said is like, oh, we don't expect anything to come of this. Like, we can't do anything because of these
yeah,
protests. We just want the story to be told.
yeah. It is like that. In India, I would say like there are a lot of people who are buying the narrative that this is an Islamist kind of protest, and it's done by pro-Pakistan, and there's even like George Soros and stuff behind this because Hasina has been
Classic.
What
sorry,
classic?
yeah,
Classic.
yeah, there is that, the deep state and all of that because Hasina has been pretty pro India and she has seemingly acted against like, hardcore Islamists. So like the Hindu right wing is like, yeah, Hasina's our person, and Modi and Hasina are friends to an extent.
So I've seen a lot of stuff about Indian students basically being evac'd over the border.
Yeah.
Um, Is that something that's actually really necessary? Is that a little dramatic? And how has it affected countries like India and other countries in the region, these protests?
Uh, okay. How much has it affected other countries? I mean, there's only two borders we're looking at. We're looking at India and Myanmar, and there have been evacuations to India, but it hasn't really affected much of, there hasn't been like a mass exodus of Bangladeshis coming across the border. That would be something that affects. Right now, it's just more repatriation. As for whether that's an alarmist thing, I don't think it's an alarmist thing at this point because, I mean, if you look like Malaysia and other countries have also been trying to evacuate their students. And the thing is, with a communications blackout and pretty much like de facto martial law, it's hard to see how things can turn in terms of the violent crackdowns that the government can do. Uh, so sorry. Yeah, even businesses have been like not sending travelers to
Hmm.
Bangladesh. There is a big impact on this because Dhaka, their capital city, you can't like the airport travel was disrupted during one day of protests, and it's not safe to go from parts of the country to the other. Like, and these protests are across the country. They're happening in Chittagong, which is the second biggest city in the country, also, and a major business destination. So people are scared because violence can spill over, and you just don't want to be caught up in that. So it's not necessarily alarmist because that is the reality of the situation.
So we kind of already pretty much covered this, but like, what's to go from here? Are they going to get bigger, or are they just going to kind of stay the same size? Do we expect death toll to rise to a certain number? Things like this.
Um, whether I mean, at this point, I think they still could get a bit bigger. Uh, death tolls will definitely rise. Like I'm sure you've seen some of the videos of security forces just shooting unarmed protesters, and
Hmm.
like dead bodies, like with one shot to the head, lying on the ground, and security forces are just walking by. Like that's fine. Um, and what I would say is also like whatever official death count that you get from the government, that's going to be like a very conservative, understated estimate, and there'll be there's likely going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of people arrested over the next few weeks as the government cracks this down. And yeah, like I said before, what I'm seeing is just a harsher crackdown. And with this internet blackout, it really helps the government in controlling the narrative and what information comes in and out. And Bangladesh does kind of have a ministry of truth, I guess. Which says which is the right narrative, or these are the events, and everything else is a lie. And they do control their digital, like what's happening in the digital space a lot. There's a lot of laws and bodies for that, and there have been for exactly this reason, for controlling the narrative in the past when incidents have happened. So people have a lot of ideas that Bangladesh is a poor third world kind of country where you just get cheap clothes and all, but it has a very strong security apparatus, considering all things considering, like its population, the size of its population, and the complexities of maintaining security in places like South Asia. So yeah, I think there's going to be a bigger crackdown, more deaths, more arrests, and this will eventually blow over. But it's just going to be like another thing that Hasina has suppressed over these years. And yeah, another concern that a lot of people have is like, especially the West, and this is funny, uh, like what comes after Hasina, because she doesn't really have a successor in place, and she's already old. And she's basically monopolized power. There were some talks about her son getting into power, Joy, but he doesn't have the kind of profile that she has. So, like in terms of if you're looking at the West and the business investments, they're more concerned about that. And this is like a blip in their operations, and it'll get back to normal. And a country like China, which has a lot of investment, especially in energy in Bangladesh, they just want this to get sorted. They want the government, like to get everyone back off the streets so they can continue. Yeah, so I mean, it's just gonna, I think, fizzle out after some time, after
So
escalation.
besides being killed by police while protesting, what are some consequences that the protesters could face?
I mean, arrested, tortured, all of that, injured, uh, critically. Um, the arrested protesters, they could also, like if you see big concentrations of protesters from a certain area, the government could take punitive actions against that, like give them less resources or not invest as much in that area, or just deny them opportunities. And this would happen to protesters across the board also. Um, and these are people who already don't have a lot of opportunities because of things like the quota and stuff. So um, I don't know. Other than violence, it'd be just the lack of economic opportunities, which has it would worsen for them, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, it's with the situation in Bangladesh, because China, you never see protesters because it's like, what's the point, right? And it kind of feel like like not to be like cruel or anything. I feel like what is the point of even protesting in Bangladesh at this point?
Yeah. Um, I get what you mean, but it does also show the frustration of people. The
Hmm.
last elections were rigged. The ones before that were rigged. People have not had any kind of outlets, whether legal or political, that they have been allowed to express any opposition towards this government in. So is that frustration builds up, and once in a while it boils over, right? Because there's no other proper avenues for it to come out. Like there's no political opposition, there's no threats to Hasina and her regime in that sense. So yeah, it's just things get bottled up and then spill over. And a lot of people who are joining these protests is, like you said, it's not only against the quota, but it's turned into a wider anti-government sentiment. and that's just because they're pissed off with the government anyway, and this is another um, nail in the coffin, or notch on the bedpost or whatever.
Mm-hmm. All right,
Yeah.
and Jack, you have any last things to add as we're getting to the 30-minute mark?
Yeah, because I just wanted to bring up, because you mentioned that these protests have been happening all over the country.
Yeah.
People have been dying all over the country as well. It's not just like isolated areas. It's like all of these deaths are multiple cities. So it's not just like an isolated incident where one group of cops decided to shoot. It's all of them.
No,
So
this is
I
definitely state
like,
sponsored.
yeah, like I really wanted to emphasize that it's not just like an isolated incident that's been really bad. It's like countrywide.
Yeah, this is planned with the state, the shoot to site orders, the like we're
Mm.
gonna go crazy here. That's all. It's not rogue officers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like we said, there was protests in the past, so like, how often do protests actually do accomplish some sort of goal, even if it is like minor appeasement that just leads to the cycle of authoritarianism where they appease just to crack down later softly over time, where they end up rolling everything back?
And also how significant is the junior officers making that statement, official or not?
Oh, I mean, it is significant in the sense that it is public. Uh, but at the end of the day, these guys don't have a lot of authority themselves. They are in the positions they are because their senior officers have allowed them, um, or these guys have supported their senior officers coming into play. And the military elite it's pretty top down control. There's a lot of that, and these guys can say they're opposed to it, but when it comes down to actually being deployed, will they say no? I don't think so. Those who would probably get fired or taken out from the military, like dishonorably discharged or whatever. And yeah, at the end of the day, like their job security, their livelihoods are on the line also. So when push comes to shove, will they actually act like that? That hasn't been seen in the past.
All right, anything else from? I think we're all.
Yep.
I think we're all set.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
it would kind of require a wider movement of what do they call it? When you the disobey, like when you disobey
Yeah,
it,
civil disobedience.
conscientious
Oh, yeah.
objections. It would have to be widespread conscientious objections for it to have any effect, because they
Yeah,
can just like get rid of them.
yeah, and like the military, like if there are factions that are anti-Hasina, they would have to like take a stand and get out from under the shadow wherever they are.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
at this point, yeah.
Okay.
All
Well, I
right.
think that covers everything.
All right. So thanks for talking to us today.
No worries, man.
Always love to have Militant while you're on to cover these events when they
Yes.
happen.
It's always good.
All right. Thanks for tuning in,
Okay.
everyone.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.